Good afternoon, everyone. Joshua Severe Weather, and happy Sunday to you. We're going to get right to it here in the tropics. An area we continue to monitor for development has its eyes on the Gulf Coast here next week. And right now, models are starting to come into some better agreement that we are certainly going to have at least a tropical storm and more than likely a hurricane that is going to impact the central and especially eastern portion of the Gulf Coast. Here is my new forecast track. I do think this will be an invest later on, and we are likely to have a plane getting down in there tomorrow to decide if, in fact, we have a depression or storm. But the challenge we're running into now is that models are showing this system consolidating fairly quickly here as it enters the southeastern Gulf when we get into Tuesday night and Wednesday. And has the potential to strengthen pretty significantly if that consolidation happens. Now, the storm center is still very broad. It is interacting with Central America. However, we're seeing more and more confidence that this system is going to develop and intensify after it does so. The big question mark on it is going to be how quickly does it consolidate and how quickly does it move. My current forecast now has this with a potential to get to Category 3 strength, major hurricane, with landfall sometime between Thursday and Friday morning on the Florida Panhandle. I've got it centered near Panama City. This part is still very uncertain. You can see that my area of potential impact goes all the way back to southeast Louisiana, including all of Mississippi and Alabama, the western Florida Panhandle, as well as farther east into the Big Bend area and even to the Tampa Bay area. So until the system forms and models are specifically running on newer data coming from aircraft measurements, we still have room for this system to develop and change in its forecast. But what I will say here is that I am taking a stab at this. I know the Hurricane Center has not put anything out yet, but the challenge is going to be once the Hurricane Center does name this a system, we're going to see hurricane watches and we're going to have less and less time to prepare for this. So I would rather take the aggressive approach and get you guys prepared at this point and hope for this to maybe not exactly pan out. Nobody wants to see another hurricane in the Gulf, but it is looking like that's going to be the case. This is the Atlantic Basin. We now have a 70% chance this develops over the next 7 days, and even a 10% chance it becomes a depression between now and Tuesday morning. Regardless, it's going to be bringing impacts into the Gulf, into the Yucatan, into Western Cuba, into Central America, and the Cayman Islands. Where I disagree with the National Hurricane Center on this is that they're saying a tropical depression is likely to form while it moves slowly northward. It is going to form, all right? The question mark is it stronger than a tropical depression? I think a storm is likely to form and a hurricane is possible at this point. Elsewhere in the Atlantic, we do have an area that will move off of Africa. We've got several days to watch it. It does not look like a threat to land, and we still have an invest disturbance, which has not become better organized. It has still a small window to become something, but just a 20% chance. In the Eastern Pacific, a couple of areas to watch as well. This one here has a shot at becoming a named system and impacting the Riviera region and the Gulf of Tehuantepec. And that's just going to add moisture into our system on the Atlantic side. We also have an area to keep an eye on beyond that. Both of these should be watched, but I'm not expecting anything like a Hurricane Otis to pop up at this point. And we do have something that's going to develop potentially south of the Big Island of Hawaii. It is not expected, though, to make a direct impact on Hawaii. Here's the Atlantic Basin. Again, you can see 70% chance of development over the hottest portion of the Atlantic Basin, that is the Northwest Caribbean. A lot of storm fuel in place. This is not an uncommon place to see storms develop. We saw this with Hurricane Ian back in 2022. We saw it with Hurricane Michael back in 2018. We saw it with Hurricane Rita back in 2005. And Wilma as well. So a spot that is typically this time of the year favorable for development. And the biggest question mark that we're going to have in the next couple of days until it forms is, does it move over the Yucatan and struggle to develop because of that land interaction, or does it stay over the Yucatan Channel in an area that I think is going to be very favorable? So that's what we're going to be watching here. Here's a look at the wide view of everything. And you can see this is our feature here over the Northwest Caribbean. The actual center probably still over land at this point. And then here are two features in the Pacific. Here's one and here's one. I'm not on my home computer. I'm actually at family here, so doing this on a laptop, so please be patient with me today. But you can see here, both of these features are actually part of a larger gyre here, a big Central American gyre, where we've got kind of two separate circulations, but heat building up, moisture building up on the Pacific side. Same goes for the Atlantic side as well. Taking a look closer at our feature here. Obviously, it is blowing up pretty quickly here today, but it does not have the low-level center required for it to become a tropical depression. In fact, that circulation center is probably still interacting with northeastern Nicaragua and eastern portions of Honduras. But what you will notice is that a lot more areas are getting heavy rain. Southern Cuba, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, portions of Haiti, Colombia, and Panama, all dealing with heavy rain. So we are definitely seeing at least the framework for something that could be a fairly large system based on the area of rain that we're dealing with. Here's a look at the visible satellite from early this afternoon. Our low pressure center is probably right about here, and we see a large concentration of showers and storms, but not yet a low level center. There is somewhat of an offshore flow here. There is a front here south of Florida and a large scale trough in place here, which is actually keeping the system from growing northward. That trough is producing westerly and southwesterly wind shear, but it is expected to lift out by tomorrow, and that will actually slingshot our system northward as high pressure begins to build in near into the east of Florida. It's going to open up the path for this system to generally move up in this direction. Question mark is it going to be like that or like this, or is it going to maybe try to make a sharper turn? In my opinion, it's going to be more likely in the middle. But again, until this system consolidates into low pressure, which will probably happen here later tomorrow and Tuesday morning in the Northwest Caribbean, then there's still going to be a lot of uncertainty at this time. Here's a look at the wind shear situation here, and the areas that are bright red indicate where wind shear is high. And you can see orange wind shear north of our system, but low wind shear over Central America. So if this was over water, it would already be strengthening into our next system, which, by the way, would be Helene. But right now, there's still wind shear off to the south and west. Now, you will see here, this dashed blue line in here indicates decreasing wind shear. This is the shear tendency. And when this amount of strong wind shear that's in place now decreases, it gives us a favorable spot for growth from the system and likely development and intensification. Here's a look at that on the GFS ensemble. You can see our trough here through tomorrow morning, but then as that trough lifts away, here it is off the East Coast, we see much lighter wind flow aloft. These whiter colors indicating upper level divergence. That allows our storms to grow and spread out. And you can see a very favorable upper level setup here as the system is likely choosing the path of least resistance. That's the Yucatan Channel here by tomorrow or Tuesday night and first thing on Wednesday. As we get closer to the Gulf Coast here, you can see we do have an upper level low that it's going to drop down into Oklahoma and into Texas. And that is eventually going to provide some southwesterly flow here, which will take the system in this direction. However, this upper low is going to be quite uncertain. It may dawdle around a little bit longer than we'd like, and that could at some point change our steering flow over more to southeasterly and bring the remains of this system back into the Mississippi River Valley. But if it misses that connection, then you could see the flow would take it up into the Carolinas, Georgia, even East Tennessee potentially. So that is also a big question mark at this point. And I don't know exactly how yet it plays out until the system forms. And obviously over time, we still have quite a bit of uncertainty to deal with. But you can kind of see here, taking a look at this upper level pattern, let me zoom it or take it back in time here. You see we've got a weak ridge of high pressure. That is these orange colors in place over the central Gulf states. Here comes the trough moving into the plains here early next week, starting tomorrow. There's a second trough behind it that's actually stronger that will overtake it. We have a building ridge across the eastern United States that may protect the Florida Peninsula if it stays strong enough. But we also have a stronger ridge taking shape here over the Rockies for the middle of next week. In between, we get stuck here as these two ridges continue to build in. We get a cutoff low, and the cutoff lows are what forecasters have nightmares about because they're extremely difficult to forecast for. As you see here, heading into Thursday, that upper low is going to draw our system north, and it's got a possibility of trying to draw it northwest, or if this upper low is a little bit farther off to the right, it could start to draw it more to the north-northeast. And again, I don't know exactly how that plays out. What I do know is that models are in much better agreement today. They're not always, they're not all completely in agreement on the details, but they're in agreement that this system is coming up towards the Florida Panhandle, but potentially still chances it could deviate left or right of this track. Here's our chance for having a tropical storm. And you can see it starts to come up here on Tuesday morning, but still less than 10%. Then up beyond 40% between Wednesday or yeah, between Tuesday night and Wednesday night, and then between Wednesday night and Thursday night, a likely tropical storm, and then potentially a hurricane. Although this doesn't forecast that here by the time we get to Thursday into Friday, and then after that, of course, our chances diminish as it may be inland. This is from Weather Nerds, great website showing you our potential track here. This is going to be Tuesday afternoon, all showing low pressure. Then you can see things start spreading, but there's still a pretty good amount of agreement that this is heading into the Southeast Gulf Wednesday night into Thursday. This is the position Thursday evening. And then as we head to Thursday night and Friday, a lot of our ensemble members already have landfall here across the Florida Panhandle. A few of them a little to the right of that, a few to the left. And then, of course, things start to disagree beyond. But there's still a couple of members here that keep this system a lot weaker for some time. They bring it over the Yucatan, keep it trapped for a while, and then have to wait for the next trough. And this delays thing. But there's a lot fewer of these showing up today than there were earlier in this prediction cycle. As we take a look here, this is the GFS ensemble, and you can see still a good amount of spread, anywhere from Southeast Louisiana all the way to near Sarasota and even Fort Myers, Florida. But these are outliers. Generally speaking, our a bundle of storms either goes up towards Mississippi and Alabama or comes towards Panama City, Port St. Joe, and the Big Bend. That is the GFS. Earlier today, we had more solutions going into the Big Bend, Tampa Bay area, and some in the Panhandle, fewer to the west. But you can see our latest model runs actually taking a few more back in here and fewer runs into the peninsula, with the Big Bend and the Eastern Panhandle being the most likely area. This is a look at the European, and this just goes up until Thursday afternoon and evening. Several solutions here in the Eastern Gulf, much fewer in the Western, so it looks like Texas, you're off the hook. Louisiana, except for maybe Plaquemine, St. Bernard Parish, probably going to your east, but no longer showing anything heading into Alabama on the European. Everything is aimed at Florida, with about 80% of our models aimed towards the Big Bend or Panhandle, and about 20% of the ensemble solutions taking it near the Tampa Bay area or into Southwest Florida. So that's a lot better agreement. I'm not ever 100% confident, because all the models could be wrong and they could all end up correcting, but this is definitely better agreement today. Now, the GFS model gets very aggressive on development. It has a tropical depression by Monday night now west of the Cayman Islands, and then a tropical storm on Tuesday heading for the Yucatan Channel. And then it doesn't stop there. It strengthens our system into a hurricane Tuesday night before it even makes it into the Gulf of Mexico. This could be too aggressive, but it could be right. And I really can't tell you just yet how that's going to play out. But pretty good consensus here. We have a hurricane on our last few GFS models. This one, a stronger hurricane. It has a Category 4 storm heading towards Port St. Joe. I'm not going to predict that at this point because this is an outlier. But you can see it's got landfall here towards evening on Thursday, and then weakening over Georgia on Friday, and then a remnant low by the time we get to the weekend across the Tennessee Valley. That high blocks things from it coming up the southeast coast into the Carolinas. Moisture will get there, but you can see the low is going to weaken significantly over the Tennessee Valley. That's the GFS. Here's the Canadian model, and of course it's slower with development, but it does go up through the Yucatan Channel, entering the Gulf by early Wednesday morning as a tropical storm, and then strengthening, albeit not as quickly as the GFS, into a hurricane by Thursday morning, and then landfall coming Thursday afternoon near Port St. Joe or Apalachicola. So the GFS and the Canadian models both have this storm coming into the Eastern Panhandle as of the latest operational runs, and then weakening, and this one also coming off to the north and west. That's the Canadian. Here's the European from earlier, and I'll run the 0Z because the 6Z only goes out 90 hours, and the European is slower to develop. It has been all along here. It's been with every single storm this season, but it does show a slower moving system that doesn't even make it off the Yucatan until Wednesday afternoon. After that happens, it strengthens it. So you see the theme here. It's going to strengthen when it gets to the Gulf, but you can see it's a lot slower and doesn't even have landfall until we get to early Friday morning. And again, very close to the Canadian, very close to the GFS. They're all within 100 miles of each other, but the timing is different and the intensity is a lot different, with the GFS being super aggressive. This is the European AI, and it is showing a similar solution to the GFS, although more of a right bend, not quite as strong, but it shows it's strengthening a lot faster and entering the Gulf as a strong tropical storm Wednesday morning, becoming a hurricane late Wednesday night or Thursday morning, and then taking aim at the Big Bend here Thursday evening as a Category 2 hurricane. It's farther to the right here, affecting more of eastern Georgia and parts of the Carolinas than what the other models are showing. And finally, the European control. This is a control run of all the ensembles. Again, has a tropical storm near the northeastern tip of the Yucatan here on Wednesday morning and afternoon. So yeah, it could be wet on Cozumel and Cancun here into Wednesday, but this will lift away pretty quickly. And you can see by Thursday morning, we are taking shape at having a strong tropical storm, then a hurricane by Thursday evening, making landfall on the western Big Bend here, just east of Apalachicola, actually very close to Tallahassee Friday morning. So they're all now keying in on either Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, or first thing Friday. Most show a hurricane. The GFS, of course, is the outlier at this point. Elsewhere in the Atlantic, we still have an area of low pressure off the New England coast boundary that is moving into the Bermuda region here. Here is the low pressure off New England. Here's another low here with Bermuda being affected by the system. And then we've got a subtropical system trying to form, but not quite there at this point over the central Atlantic. Pretty quiet, all in all, here over the northwest Atlantic. This is the central Atlantic, and you can see the remains of Gordon not going to redevelop. Some disturbed weather in the central Atlantic, but strong wind shear and dry air keeping anything from forming at this point. Here is a look at that Invest 96L, and you can see thunderstorms are not as persistent here as they were yesterday at this time. And here's our visible that shows kind of a naked swirl again. It's not gotten any better organized. I know it's at 20%, but a lot of dry air surrounds the system, which will probably keep it from becoming a developing system. And finally, coming off the African coast, things are definitely getting wetter here. We are heading into a more favorable phase to see waves coming off of Africa that will try to develop. I don't think they'll be super aggressive at this point, but something we need to watch. If you take a look at the GFS in the longer term, it does develop something towards the middle of the week west of the Cape Verdes, and then does have a stronger system, but it is already making a turn to the right and no longer expected to be a threat to the Lesser Antilles. In fact, probably a fish storm. The one after it could do kind of the same thing here, potentially, if you believe the GFS. The GFS has given us some hints that something may try to get going again around Central America, including the Caribbean or the Southwest Gulf towards the end of next week, around the 3rd or 4th of October. But that is still way too far off in the future to get too specific on, and I'm not going to be forecasting that. But just know if you are in the Gulf, I don't think that future Helene is going to be your last system based on what I'm seeing here, but I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen next. So this is a wider view of everything. We do have Invest 94E that could become a tropical storm John in the Pacific, heading towards the Gulf of Tehuantepec in here, probably east of Acapulco, more towards Salina Cruz. And then that should weaken significantly over land when it moves into southeast Mexico, but that moisture is still going to be there. Another area to watch here, and then this next Invest in the Central Pacific is a 70% chance of staying south of Hawaii, but becoming a system that may get a name. And then finally, in the Western Pacific, not quite as busy as it has been, but we're still seeing tons of rain in these features here. One that is moved just north of Taiwan towards Gwangju, and that is weakening inland. Another area to watch here near Hainan, and a third area to keep an eye on near Myanmar, which will move into the Bay of Bengal here. And this system needs to be watched here. It is going to move into the Northern Mariana Islands in a few days, staying just north of Guam. And I'm not going to show you the models. There's a huge spread, but Japan could be in the longer term plans for that system, depending on where it eventually develops. So that's all I got for you today. I'll have another video at lunchtime tomorrow. I do expect we're going to start to see some tropical models and maybe even watches and warnings tomorrow in advance of this developing system. As always, I thank you for your time today. And if you did enjoy this video, I ask that you consider subscribing. I appreciate y'all's time today, and I hope you have a blessed Sunday. I give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who has given me this gift to help others and to encourage others. And I know it's tough to be encouraged with all the evil that we have in the world today, but I do want to encourage you because I truly believe we serve a powerful God. He's a great God. Paul tells the church of Galatia, Galatians 6:9, and let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, and I just lost my scripture, but anyway, we'll stop at Galatians 6:9, but I'm here if you have any prayer requests, please feel free to list those. I do pray for everybody that comes here. I believe you've been brought here for a reason. And I'm praying for everybody here in the Gulf. I grew up in Louisiana. I've been through many storms. My family have been through a lot. I am not seeking any joy in what I do here. I'm just trying to help others be prepared for what is to come. So I hope you guys have a blessed Sunday, and I will catch up with you soon. See ya.